Well, good morning again, everyone, and Happy New Year. For any who may not know me, whether you're in person or whether you're watching from afar, streaming later, my name is Pastor Ian Boley. I'll add my welcome to Pastor Bob's and also add my thanks to all of you for joining us for worship today. So we've all had a busy couple of weeks over the holidays. My wife and daughters and I, we spent lots of time with our extended families and friends. We were celebrating Christmas, as we all were, celebrating New Year's, and in fact have been doing so several times over, eating and drinking, exchanging gifts, watching movies, watching TV, watching sports, football, and occasionally sleeping. We've got one more celebration today. My brother and sister are both in town, joining us for worship this morning. They'll be joining us back at the parsonage later after church for a Boley family Christmas brunch. And so it's our final official gathering of this holiday season. So, a bit of review about my family this morning, my extended family, that is. My daughters, Amy and Eliza, you all know well. They are the younger cousins on my side of the family. We've got our nephews, Will and James, here this morning. They're the older cousins. But Amy and Eliza are the oldest cousins on Jessica's side of the family. So what that means is that they spent this Christmas a lot of time fawning over their baby cousin, Sophie, or as she's affectionately known, Baby Sophie, or Soph, or Soph. So, Sophie is the first baby of Jessica's sister Emily, so she's our first niece, the youngest cousin on that side of the family, at least for now. We've got at least one more on the way on that side. So, all of this is to say that watching Sophie and watching our daughters watch Sophie was a very popular pastime for everyone this Christmas. Now, Sophie was born back in March, so this is her first Christmas, and she is just starting to discover the world in her own special baby-like way. Now, it makes us, Jessica and me, very nostalgic for when our own girls were her age. Of course, Eliza's 4 now, Amy is 7, but we're remembering when they were both that small and discovering the world in the same way she's been discovering it. So, for instance, Sophie recently discovered how much fun clapping her hands can be. She was, sitting in the middle of the living room, opening one of her many, many Christmas presents with help from her mom or with help from one of our girls. She was taking cues from everyone sitting around her. She was celebrating each new present by putting her hands together, smiling at all of us in that way that babies do. And she claps and claps and looks at all of us as if to say, "Did you guys know that we can do this with our hands? You gotta try it, it's so much fun." So it's been a joy for us and of course for Sophie's parents, Evan and Emily, to watch her joy as she discovers the world one step at a time. An epiphany is a moment or an event in which something is revealed to us, and seemingly for the first time. It can be a moment of divine truth. It can be a special insight. It can be a personal realization, an emotional breakthrough. It can even be a scientific discovery. It can be like that moment in the mystery novel where the detective finally figures everything out, where it all comes together because of that one missing detail, that one vital piece of information, and then we all become like Dr. Watson, right? As everything is explained to us for the first time. An epiphany always involves some kind of revelation, some kind of revealing, some kind of ultimate truth. So we have our passage for today. This is familiar to all of you. We're in Matthew chapter 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem, in the territory of Judea, during the rule of King Herod, Magi came from the east to Jerusalem. They asked, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We've seen his star in the east, and we've come to honor him." When King Herod heard this, he was troubled, and everyone in Jerusalem was troubled with him. He gathered all the chief priests and the legal experts and asked them where the Christ was to be born. They said, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what the prophet wrote. You, Bethlehem, land of Judah, by no means are you least among the rulers of Judah, because from you will come one who governs, who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and found out from them the time when the star had first appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you found him, report to me so that I too may go and honor him." When they heard the king, they went. And look, the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with Mary, his mother. Falling to their knees, they honored him. Then they opened their treasure chests and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And because they were warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they went back to their own country by another route. So we also heard that a few weeks ago. We've just heard it again now. This is the Epiphany passage. The Epiphany passage from the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew is the only gospel to include this part of the Christmas story. And notice how simple it is, or perhaps how different it is from the way we often picture it. I don't know if you caught this, but the number 3 is never mentioned. Never says anything about 3 wise men. The names that we've come to associate with them, Gaspar or Caspar, Balthazar, Melchior, never mentioned. No names in here. They are described not as kings, but as magi from the east. And a magi is essentially a Persian priest or a wise man. And at times, this term has even meant like sorcerer or magician. And so that, of course, is where we also get the word magic from. The Greek and Latin words for magic actually come from, they originate from this old Persian term, magi. So when we read this, our mind fills in the blanks here, doesn't it? As it often does. We assume that there are 3 magi because Matthew mentions 3 gifts. We picture them as kings because that is how they came to be depicted in later medieval artwork. But in fact, in Greek and Eastern Orthodox traditions, there are often 12 magi. 12 from the east rather than only 3. And so Matthew's addition to the Christmas story, it has evolved over the years, and it's certainly captured our imaginations as it's done so. Gaspar and Balthazar and Melchior and their 3 gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, they've all taken on further symbolic meaning as this story has evolved. We've got gold for Jesus, the divine king. We've got frankincense for Jesus, the priest. And we've got myrrh, or embalming oil, for Jesus, the mortal human. And the 3 kings, as many of us know, this has all become common knowledge here, they've subsequently become a metaphor for the entire Gentile world. We've got one from Europe, one from Africa, one from Asia, the 3 known continents of the time. They are often depicted in that way. They are symbols for the world bearing witness to the Christ child for the first time. Now, one other thing about this passage. We already talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We'll just briefly point it out again. Notice how the wise men respond to King Herod. So we contrasted, the first time around, we contrasted Herod's role in this story with the role of Joseph. Now, the Epiphany, the revelation, the divine presence, the godly truth here, it is troubling to King Herod. It is inherently threatening to King Herod. And the authority of God in the world is once again revealed to be greater than the authority of mortal kings. Now, most of you are familiar with this. The United Methodist Lectionary, if you're not familiar with that term, it's basically just a calendar that we sometimes use to sort of map out the story of Jesus over the course of our many Sundays of worship. This lectionary, this calendar, pairs today's Epiphany reading with a reading from Psalm 72. We're going to hear that in a moment, and it does this. It puts these two readings together for a very specific reason. It does it because of this contrast between Herod's kingly authority and the divine authority of Jesus. And so here, the psalmist in Psalm 72 is offering a prayer for the king of Israel and Judah to rule with the same righteousness as God. So here is Psalm 72. We're going to hear the first 7 verses of it. God, give your judgments to the king. Give your righteousness to the king's son. Let him judge your people with righteousness and your poor ones with justice. Let the mountains bring peace to the people. Let the hills bring righteousness. Let the king bring justice to people who are poor. Let him save the children of those who are needy, but let him crush oppressors. Let the king live as long as the sun, as long as the moon, generation to generation. Let him fall like rain upon fresh-cut grass, like showers that water the earth. Let the righteous flourish throughout their lives, and let peace prosper until the moon is no more. So there's some very, very nice psalm-like imagery there in that, the beginning of that psalm, Psalm 72. It's titled A Psalm of Solomon, a prayer for the rule of King Solomon. As we've said, the epiphany of Christ is troubling to King Herod. Now, by all accounts, Herod was not the kind of ruler we hear the psalmist pleading for. The psalm is asking for God's righteousness, for God's justice, for peace, for compassion for the poor and the needy. And King Herod simply isn't remembered for any of these things. He is remembered rather for his cruelty, for his excess. He is remembered for his collaboration with the Roman occupiers in first century Palestine. In fact, the most flattering historical account of King Herod comes from a Roman historian, a guy named Josephus. Perhaps you've heard of him before. His full name is Flavius Josephus. Josephus was a Roman historian, so that should tell you everything that you need to know about what kind of king Herod was to his own people. But when God's presence in the world is made known, when God's children are invited once again to bear witness to this divine truth, it changes everything that we think we know. It starts a new year for us. It starts a new age. It starts a new era. And hopefully, it calls us to the kind of ministry the psalmist asks for. It calls us to the kind of ministry that Jesus himself practiced, taught, and embodied. It's the kind of witness that makes Herod take notice. It's the kind of witness that makes the whole world take notice. It's a new vision, a vision of peace, justice, kindness, compassion, righteousness, and truth for the whole globe. Now, I think the way this works, in fact, I believe deeply that the way this works is that when we really see the presence of God in the world, when we really see God's creation anew, the way it is meant to be seen, we cannot help but to see God and Christ in everything and in everyone around us. We see our neighbors as neighbors again. We see Christ in each other. We see everything as if for the first time. So, when baby Sophie is sitting on that living room floor, discovering the world for the first time, opening her first Christmas presents, clapping her hands and smiling, feeling that first tooth come in, it's like a bunch of small epiphanies. You see, it's not just about all of us bearing witness to the Christ child. It's also about all of us becoming like that Christ child. Seeing the world through new eyes. Seeing God and creation again for the first time. Seeing how God's presence in the world is revealed. Seeing the way that this actually works. How Christ holds everything together, pouring out into every corner of the world, being renewed in every moment of our lives. Epiphany is God being willing to rediscover the world through the eyes of a child, and God inviting all of us to do the same thing at the same time. So just the other day, just a day or two after Christmas, we saw a video of baby Sophie, Soph, taking her first steps. She's started walking now. So before they know it, she'll be running all over the house, and a whole new category of baby-proofing will have to take effect for them. So we're praying for Sophie's parents, for Evan and Emily. We're maybe a little bit nervous for the next time we will have to babysit. We're hoping we can remember how to do it for one her age, getting all those steps in. But today and every day, give thanks to God for the gift of Epiphany. Try to see creation, to see your life, to see your neighbor, to see every child of God through baby's eyes again. Thanks be to God for that gift, and amen.